not shortened that it cannot save. So in other words, if God doesn't show up, it's not because he can't. It's not because he doesn't have the power to intervene. His hand has not been shortened so that it cannot save, or his ear made dull that it cannot hear. So it's not that God doesn't have the power to intervene and stop things, or that he's not hearing the prayer requests that we offer. It is that his ear is not too dull that it cannot hear. So what is the problem? Verse 2, Isaiah tells us, your iniquities, speaking to the nation, have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he does not hear. So, we have these school shootings at Sandy Hook and other places. And what we need to realize, this is basically what Isaiah is saying, is look, if you have a culture, you have a nation that spends 60 years telling God to get lost, then we should not be surprised when he's not around when we want him to be. Now, what have we done to create this separation between us and a God whose ear can hear and whose arm can save? But he doesn't, because there's a separation between us and him. Verse 3, your hands are defiled with blood, he says, and your fingers with iniquity. So when we hold up our hands in prayer, you know what God sees? When the people of our nation lift their hands to God in prayer, he sees the blood of 60 million innocent babies defiling our hands and dripping off our fingers. And so he can't hear, he can't see. His view is blocked by the blood, the shed blood of the innocents. Then he says in the end of verse 3, your lips have spoken lies, your tongue mutters wickedness. So he says, look, I see you talking to me in prayer. I see your lips moving, but all I can hear are the lies that you tell the rest of the time. All I can hear are the lies that you tell your neighbors, your friends, your family members when you are not praying to me. Now, there's another complaint he has for the culture, and this will sound remarkably current. I mean, the Bible is as relevant today as it was when these words were first uttered. See if this doesn't remind you of this Mueller circus. Verse 4, no one enters suit justly. No one goes to law honestly. They rely on empty pleas. They speak lies. They conceive mischief and give birth to iniquity. They hatch adders' eggs. They weave the spider's web. He who eats their eggs dies, and from one that is crushed a viper is hatched. You know, and you look at what's been done here in this Mueller investigation, did not have a just reason to investigate Donald Trump or anybody associated with him. You know, Paul Manafort has been dragged into court today, and the judges had to rebuke the Mueller team. Look, you want to show us pictures of all the $1,200 suits that he owns and all of the houses that he lives in and whatever. It is not a crime to be rich or live a lavish life. That's what the judge is having to say to the Mueller people. That's not evidence of a crime. It's not a crime in America to make a lot of money, not a crime in America to live a lavish lifestyle. So here you got an investigation, had no legal justification to begin with. They did not enter court justly, and now they're using lies to perpetuate their case. So Isaiah, as relevant today as in the days when he wrote these words. Now let's read a little bit more out of, starting in verse 9. Therefore, justice is far from us. Righteousness does not overtake us. We hope for light, and behold darkness, and for brightness, but we walk in gloom. We grope for the wall like the blind. We grope like those who have no eyes. We stumble at noon, as in the twilight. Among those in full vigor, we are like dead men. Justice, he says in verse 14, is turned back, and righteousness stands afar off. Listen to this. For truth has stumbled in the public squares, and uprightness cannot enter. Truth is lacking. He who departs from evil makes himself a prey. So you think about this, that the left, their view is, hey, in your churches, you can talk about the truth all you want, but not in the public square. We are going to block the public square from you. You will not be allowed to bring your truth into the public square. And if you do try to tell the truth, you have made yourself a prey. We are going to come after you with everything that we have. Well, let's go to prayer. Sovereign Lord, we bring our city and our nation before you this day. We confess that our iniquities have separated us from you, and our sins have hidden your face from us. Our hands are stained with the blood of abortion and violence. Our lips have spoken lies that our hearts have conceived. No one calls for justice in our court system or files lawsuits justly. We confess that our sins are many in your sight. Our deeds as a nation are too often evil deeds, and our thoughts are evil thoughts. We look for light, but all is darkness. We ask on behalf of our land that you will put on righteousness as your breastplate, wrap yourself in zeal, and deliver us. Amen.
Are you a responsible person who finds yourself growing deeper and deeper in credit card debt and you're not sure how to fix the problem? Then get ready for a toll-free number that will put you on a path to financial recovery. Trinity Debt Management is a nonprofit organization that will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, and reduce your interest rates by as much as 60%. You'll save thousands and become debt-free for keeps. It's not a loan. It's a smart way to relieve your stress, meet your obligations, and preserve your self-respect. If your debt has you down, we should talk. Gather up your bills and call this toll-free number for a free, no-obligation debt analysis. 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813. If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
Be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. In an amazing development, President Donald Trump and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker have announced that the United States and the European Union have reached a deal to work toward zero tariffs. The deal includes the EU importing more liquefied natural gas from the U.S., more soybeans from the U.S., and lower industrial tariffs. So far, it seems President Trump is succeeding by doing things recent past presidents wouldn't even try. Don't look now, but the EU just blinked on tariffs. We'll have to see what happens next.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. Great to have you in the conversation today. You know, just following up on our study in Isaiah 59 about truth stumbling in the public squares where uprightness cannot enter. And he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. All the forces of evil are turned against somebody who departs from evil, begins to walk in righteousness and teach righteousness. You know, I've told you this story before, but back when I was working in public policy in Idaho, one of the things we worked on in 1993 was a statewide initiative that would ban homosexual propaganda in schools and libraries. Well, I had a lesbian activist come up to me, and we worked hard to get that thing passed, fell just a tad short. But she said to me right to my face, look, I don't care what you do in your churches. I don't care what you preach in your churches. Your churches belong to you. but the public square belongs to us. And you, as a Christian, you're not allowed in the public square. That's our turf. What you do in here, inside the four walls of your church, knock yourself out, that's fine, but don't dare bring your propaganda into the public square. And that's exactly what Isaiah is talking about here. You know, and if you do, you become a prey. You become a target for people on the left that will hate you. You know, Dak Prescott defended the anthem and standing for the anthem yesterday. So look, I'm going to stand. When the anthem is being played, the flag is being displayed, I'm going to stand. I'm going to stand with my toes on the line. I'm going to do it every day. He got blasted for this by people on the left, including some of his fellow African Americans. He was called on Twitter a lemonade-serving house Negro, all for saying, when the anthem is being played, the flag is being displayed, I'm going to stand in honor of the flag. Reminds me of one other thing, this business in Isaiah 59 about truth can't enter the public square, righteousness is not allowed to enter. Here's a saying, and I want you to guess who said this. This is a slogan that was used a lot a number of years ago. Politics do not belong in the church, and the church must be separate from the state. I'm going to repeat that slogan. I want you to guess who came up with it. Politics do not belong in the church, and the church must be separate from the state. You know who invented that phrase? It wasn't the ACLU, wasn't the Freedom from Religion Foundation. It was Adolf Hitler. This is right out of his propaganda machine. He wanted to neutralize the church. He wanted to silence it. He wanted to emasculate it. He wanted to confine it. He wanted to muzzle it. So he came up with these slogans. The church must be separate from the state. That's the old separation of church and state lie. And politics do not belong in the church. So Hitler saying to the pastors like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, talk about all the spiritual truth you want in the church, but don't you dare touch on the issue of politics. Well, speaking of someone who does touch on the issue of politics, I want to welcome to our decision maker line Stacy Washington. She's the host of the program Stacy on the Right, and she will be heard every day, Monday through Friday, on this network, starting next Monday at 2:05 p.m. So rather than the second hour of Focal Point, you will get the first hour of Stacy Washington. Her program is called Stacy on the Right. So we will welcome her to the Talk Network next Monday, August 6th. Stacy, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, it's great to have you here. And Stacy, a lot of our listeners don't know a lot about you, and I confess I'm one of them. We've not met. We've not talked before. So I thought maybe we'd use a few minutes here as kind of a get acquainted session. So Stacy, just tell us a little bit about your biography, about your life. Kind of walk us briefly through where you've been and how you got to where you are today.
Well, Brian, it's really awesome to be welcomed onto your program for the first time. Hello to all of your listeners, and it's a blessing to have this opportunity to be on the Talk Network for American Family Radio. My bio is you know, I think it's pretty interesting. I've been doing radio for about 6 years now, but the way that I got there is obviously as a kid, I grew up in Germany and traveled all over the world because my father was on active duty in the Army. He was a military policeman, and my mom was a budget analyst for the federal government. And so I grew up in Germany, and I graduated from Mannheim American High School, went to college at TSU for a couple of years, and then came home for a year and joined the Air Force. And that's where I met my husband. And after serving one tour of duty in the Air Force, we moved to the Midwest for him to take a contract position. We thought we'd be here for 3 years, which was the term of the contract, but we've ended up living here for almost 20 years here in the St. Louis area. So he's now in the private sector, and we have 3 kids. We have an 18-year-old who's off to college in the fall, a 17-year-old, and then a 15-year-old, 2 girls and a boy. And we have a little dog. He's a Maltese. He's a little hair dog, a fancy puppy. His name's Bentley, the Conserva pup. And I actually have been a stay-at-home mom up until I started doing radio. And the way I made my way into radio, Brian, is I was actually volunteering at our kids' school doing a lot of the stuff that moms do. You know, you do copy committee, you do the kindergarten social, the first grade social, you do mom's nights, and, you know, a lot of volunteer work on the diversity committee, which I actually joined to make sure that they didn't promote diversity. So I was like a covert operative, if you will. I went on the committee and they were like, yay, a black mom. She's going to totally be for everything we want. And I was the one who was always convincing them that genderless bathrooms in the elementary school were a horrible idea, that same-sex couples could do anything they wanted, but we did need to promote it in school, et cetera, et cetera. And that landed me on the strategic planning committee. And from there, I ended up getting an appointment on the Board of Education. I ran for the seat after serving the appointment and lost, and ended up speaking at the Rally Under the Arch with a radio station here in town and meeting Dick Morris and Senator Roy Blunt and a bunch of other real superstars who were in town for the event. And from there, I went on to do some nonprofit activism, and I did an interview about MAFA 21 and the genocide of abortion on our local radio program, The Morning Show. And the host loved the 7-minute interview so much that he asked me to come back on a weekly basis. And that's when I started the blog, Stacy on the Right. And from there, I got a weekly show and then a daily show on Urban Family Talk. And now I am so excited about next week on Monday when I get to blast into the stratosphere on AFR.
Well, that'll be next Monday, and it's 2:05 Central, Stacy on the Right. You'll have her for a full hour here, and then if you'd like to pick up a second hour of Stacy on the Right, you can go over to the Urban Network and catch hour number 2 over there. Well, Stacy, you've got a history with your husband in the military, so I would think that would make you a supporter of a strong military that will protect the safety and security of the United States. You've been a mom, so you're going to be very concerned about issues that impact the family. You've served in the Board of Education, so you're going to be concerned about things that affect education in our country. I just saw a story today about 2,400 teachers in North Carolina, elementary school teachers in North Carolina, can't even pass the math exam that qualifies them to teach at that level. So obviously we've got some work to do in the education level. So give us a feel for, Stacy, for people tune into your program starting next Monday, 2:05, right here on AFR. Give us a flavor for what they're going to hear from you. What are the things that energize you? What are the topics that you gravitate to? What are the things that really kind of turn your crank in terms of the issues that really motivate you to speak out?
Well, the first thing I want to highlight is that one of the absolute joys for me being on Urban Family Talk is that it's on Christian radio, and so I'm no longer inhibited about talking about my faith. And I don't think any of the other stations that I've been on have ever been hostile. They've always been really open and allowed me to control my own show. But there's something uniquely freeing about being on Christian radio and having an audience that's tuning in for that specific worldview that is just, it's like unleashing something for me within myself to be able to connect all of these things together, because I believe that there is only one worldview for a Christian, and that is seeing things through the Word of God and living your life like you know that this is the tiny little audition and eternity is the real deal, and we have to store up our treasure in heaven. So what people are going to hear when they tune into the show is a passionate, conservative Christian woman. And I say conservative Christian, that rolls off the tongue a little easier, but Christian is my primary identity. So I'm not concerned with race. We'll talk about it, but that's not where the rubber meets the road. When we look at the Word of God, he talks about who we are in Christ. He talks about a royal priesthood, clothed in white, and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. He never talks about whether or not you have a permanent tan or if you tan in the summer. He never talks about that stuff. So what I love to do and what I hope people will hear when they tune in is us having fun, us sharing the news of the day, talking about politics. We have a segment called The Encouragement where we unpack some scripture and talk about how we can use that to be encouraged in our walk on a daily basis, and that they'll hear my passion for prayer and what prayer can do in our individual lives and how we corporately can pray together to change this nation. I don't believe our culture is dead. I believe it is sick, but it has to be, because culture is based on humanity. Humanity is sick with sin. The only answer to that is a Savior, which is Jesus Christ. And I just want people to think when they hear this show, when they leave the show, that I'm every day concentrating on Ephesians 3:14. For this reason, I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. I'm a bondservant to Christ. He is my Savior. I do all of these things for him. And all radio hosts are kind of pompous. We have to be. We're on the radio. But all of this, I hope, is storing up something that when I get there, I will be judged, but that he will say I have done a good job and I've worked for him and that I've made an impact for him. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Our guest has been Stacy Washington. She's the host of Stacy on the Right, which you can hear right here on AFR starting next Monday at 2:05 Central. What normally has been the second hour of Focal Point, that's what you've been used to hearing as the second hour of Focal Point. But the second hour now will belong to Stacy on the Right. Stacy Washington, she'll be with you Monday through Friday, 2:05 Central right here on American Family Radio. And I think you got a flavor for what you will get with Stacy on the Right, so I want to encourage you to tune in next Tuesday and catch Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio. Well, Stacy, thank you for taking a few minutes to chat with us. Everybody around here is anticipating your program on the Tuck Network. God bless you, and I'm sure we'll have occasion to talk again before long.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for the gracious handoff. I appreciate your show, and I greatly respect your work here.
Thank you, Stacy. God bless you.
God bless.
All right, Stacy Washington, Stacy on the Right, next Monday at 2:05 Central right here on American Family Radio. Now, we come back, we'll get into some more, get into some more content. Talk a little bit more about the Mueller trial. We're going to talk about the Kavanaugh nomination. We're going to talk about whether Trump ought to shut down the government to the wall. We'll be back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bring Every Thought Captive. As I told you yesterday, this past week, the U.S. State Department held a very important summit on religious freedom and freedom of conscience around the world. It was convened by the U.S. State Department in our nation's capital. The summit issued the Potomac Declaration, which will bring hope to those who are suffering for religious freedom and conscience sake around the world. The Potomac Declaration is worth quoting at length, and I quote, "Defending the freedom of religion or belief is the collective responsibility of the global community. Religious freedom is essential for achieving peace and stability within nations and among nations. Where religious freedom is protected, other freedoms, like freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly, also flourish. Protections for the free exercise of religion contribute directly to political freedom, economic development, and the rule of law. Where it is absent, we find conflict, instability, and terrorism. Our world is a better place, too, when religious freedom thrives. Individual and communal religious belief and expression have been essential to the flourishing of societies throughout human history. People of faith play an invaluable part in our communities. Faith and conscience motivates people to promote peace, tolerance, and justice, to help the poor, to care for the sick, to minister to the needy, to engage in public debates, and to serve their countries. Religious freedom is a far-reaching, universal, and profound human right that all peoples and nations of goodwill must defend around the globe." End quote. To find a link to the Potomac Declaration and to the UN Declaration on Human Rights, go to the SES app for today's program. This is Dr. Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net. afa.net.
Welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Ignore the laughter in the studio. That's my team trying to give me a hard time here. Trying to trip me up, actually.
That's Rob on the break. Rob is an entertaining guy.
Yeah, Jeff trying to absolve himself of any blame here.
I'm not saying anything.
Anyway, I want to talk about the wall and whether Donald Trump ought to shut it down. Remember, he's gone back and forth on this about shutting the government down in order to get funding for his wall. Now, remember, and by the way, when we go to phone calls today, at the end of the second hour, this is all I want to hear from you about. What I want to hear from you is, do you think President Trump ought to shut down the government to fund the wall or not? And then give me your reasons why or why not. Do you think Donald Trump ought to shut down the government in order to get funding for the wall? So that'll be the question. I'm giving it to you in advance. We'll review when we go to the phone call segment. But that's what I want to hear from you all about. Now, we've got some clips on this topic of the wall and immigration and funding for the wall. Here is clip number 1. Yesterday was Rush Limbaugh's 30th anniversary of his career in talk radio, and he's the man in talk radio. It's like there's never gonna be another Michael Jordan. There's never gonna be another Joe Montana. There's never gonna be another Jerry Rice. There is never gonna be another Rush Limbaugh. He is the man, and he is the dean and talk radio, et cetera, et cetera. He's the guy. Never gonna be anybody better than Rush Limbaugh. And anyway, obviously, he's got a nationwide profile. He's been a strong supporter of Donald Trump. He was basically one of the earliest people on the Trump train, defended him very early in the process. And President Trump called Limbaugh to congratulate him yesterday on 30 years in the business. I've got 2 sound bites from their exchange as they talk about the wall. They talk about the possibility of a shutdown. Here is clip number 1.
And the other thing is the wall. You have no idea how tough I've been. And I say, hey, if you have a shutdown, you have a shutdown. Now, the shutdown can also take place after the election. I happen to think it's a great political thing because people want border security. It's not just the wall, Rush, as you know. It's border security. It's getting rid of catch and release. Where you catch somebody, he can be a criminal of the highest order, and you have to release him. You catch him, you take his name, and you release him. And then you have the visa lottery. It's a lottery system where you pick people out of a lottery. Well, the countries aren't giving us their best people. They're giving us people that they don't want. So we're taking people out of a lottery that the country doesn't want. We're getting some beauties.
So Trump making the point, you go to this visa lottery where it's the luck of the draw. There isn't any reason for these host countries, to dump their worst offenders in that bucket and hope that they get drawn out of the bucket and therefore they can offshore their worst actors to America and have us deal with them. That's what Donald Trump was talking about. He says we need to go to a merit-based merit system of admission to the United States. Chain lottery is a horrible idea. You get one family member here, pretty soon they've got a couple of dozen relatives that are here, and who knows how many of those are going to be bad actors and bad hombres. So that's what Donald Trump wants to do, wants to get a wall up, secure the border, wants to go to a merit-based immigration system where we pick the best and the brightest from these other countries instead of getting the worst and the dumbest and the most violence-prone, which is what we are getting right now. But you notice that Trump says here that a shutdown could take place before the election or after the election. I happen to think, he went on to say, that it's a great political thing because people want border security. So he says we could shut it down before the election, we could shut it down after the election, but he thinks it's going to be politically popular. I completely agree with him. You know, 88% of Republicans are with Donald Trump, and they voted for Donald Trump. And why did they do it? Why did the American people vote for Donald Trump? One word, wall. Donald Trump promised in the campaign to build a wall to keep the bad actors out, to secure our southern border. People have been waiting for 2 decades to hear a word like that, and they voted for Donald Trump. They elected him because of his promise on border security, his promise to build a wall. And that's why I just do not think that Donald Trump can afford to wait. I think he's got to do it now. That's the substance of my column, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. But let's play clip number 2. This is Donald Trump talking with radio host Rush Limbaugh yesterday.
I happen to think it's a good thing politically. I'm not doing it for politics. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. So I'm not looking at politics. But I happen to think that border security would be a good thing before the election. But there are many people within our party that are good good people that like you, that agree with you on everything you say, but they'd rather do it after. They don't agree on doing it before. And I accept their opinion, but I happen to think it would be a good thing to do before. I actually think we'd get more, and there'd be more pressure on the other side, because we're doing it because the Democrats are not giving us the votes.
Well, I think Donald Trump's analysis here, were you getting ready to say something, Jeff?
Oh, no, I was just enjoying that. It was kind of a cool phasing thing going on. And, I mean, if people were driving around and they have good stereos in their car, they could probably hear it. But with the headphones, it sounded really cool.
All right, cool deal.
Yeah. Did you notice it?
I did. It was actually recorded in a vehicle.
Was he in a vehicle when he was when he was talking?
I was surprised at how they recorded that, but it was pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
Well, I want to encourage you to think about reading my article. Not to think about reading it. I want to encourage you to read it. Don't think about it. Just do it. Do the Nike thing. It's at afa.net. It's up there now. It's the title of my piece. It's a pretty subtle hint to the president about what I think he ought to do. Title is "Shut Her Down, Donald. Shut her down." See if he can see through the nuance there and get to the heart of that message. And my point here is, if Donald Trump wants to fulfill his promise to voters, that's to us, the people that elected him, to build a border wall, there is only one way that he can do it, and that is to shut down the government until he gets funding for it. That's the only way he's going to get it. You know, we talked about Bob Thune yesterday. He said, "I'm with the president on supporting the wall. The need for the wall is critical, blah, blah, blah. We want to help the president with that objective, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think the best way to do it is by shutting the government down." But you notice that Bob Thune does not go on anywhere to say, okay, if that's not the best way to do it, what is? If this is not the time to do it, when is the time to do it? Bob Thune doesn't say. We'll just get to that later. Just kicking the can down the road. Now, as you probably are aware, the current fiscal year expires at the end of September, and voters will be going to the polls for the midterm elections about 5 or 6 weeks later. Now, if there was ever a time when nervous Nelly Republicans, that's most of the congressmen that are on Capitol Hill, would cough up $25 billion for border security, this would be the time when there's some pressure on them. You know, this is what Richard Shelby said. We played the soundbite yesterday. He openly admitted to us that a shutdown is the Achilles heel of the establishment. It's the one thing that will work. It's the one thing that they fear above all other things. He said this: pressure works. I guess fear works at times with all of us, but we all fear a government shutdown, and we should try to avoid it, and that's what we are trying to do. So they are completely spooked about a government shutdown. To them, that's the worst of all possible worlds, which means that they can be maneuvered by the threat of and the implementation of a government showdown. So essentially what we have here is a classic high noon showdown. For the swamp, avoiding a shutdown is far more important to them than funding a wall. For Trump and for us, Trump's base, a wall is way more important than a shutdown. Shutdown is temporary, a wall is forever. That's more important to us. So the only question is, who's going to blink first in this showdown? Now, Trump, remember, has already folded once on his threat to shut down the government over wall funding. He did about exactly this time last year when he signed that omnibus bill. And remember, he said, I'm never going to sign a bill like this again. Well, that's what's going to happen. If he doesn't shut the government down over this, he's going to have to sign another bill exactly like one he said he'd never sign again. And President Trump is making noises like he's prepared to do it again and put off the shutdown until after the election, which is a terminally bad idea. You know, as I mentioned, 88% of Republicans support the president right now. They elected him because of his promise to build the wall. So if Donald Trump presses down on his shutdown threat, his base, the 88% of Republicans that voted for him and support him, they will stand with him. They will stand behind him. But if he caves again, even Donald Trump's base is would begin to entertain doubts about his resolve. So now's the time when he has the maximum leverage. Senator Shelby's already admitted it. So, Mr. President, if you hold your ground, they have only one way to avoid a shutdown, and that is to give you what you want. Their weakness is your greatest strength. So use it. The thing they fear above all else is a government shutdown, which means, President Trump, if it will help them to avoid a shutdown, they will give you the funding for your wall. So the reality is, in fact, that a government shutdown is absolutely nothing to fear. It's nothing to dread. In a so-called shutdown, 83% of the government keeps right on cooking. The military keeps protecting us. The mail is still delivered. Social Security checks keep going out. And for the few government workers who actually do get sent home, it's a paid vacation. They always get made whole for their time off, and the planet continues to spin on its axis. And there's a simple way to make Mexicans, not Mexico, but Mexicans pay for the wall. Slap a 4% tax on remittances. They send $25 billion a year from the United States back to Mexico. 4% tax, that's $1 billion a year in perpetuity. You can build a pretty good wall with $1 billion a year. So the bottom line, Mr. President, is shut her down. Mr. Trump, shut her down. Be right back.
Caring about the direction our nation is headed is one thing. Doing something about it is another. The Values Voter Summit in Washington, D.C. is the premier gathering for equipping Christian conservatives for returning the culture to one that values human life, encourages families, and defends religious liberty. Plan now to join other values voters on September 21st through the 23rd. Learn more and register at valuesvotersummit.org. valuesvotersummit.org, sponsored in part by AFA Action.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point. That's one of my favorite little sections of bumper music right there.
And howdy works really well.
Yeah, it works with that music.
That's perfect.
So, anyway, glad to have you back on Focal Point. It's American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Want to talk a little bit more about this wall funding idea. Again, remember, Mexico, or Mexicans to be specific, they send money back to Mexico. They come to America and they work here, a lot of them illegally. And they send money from what they make here in the United States, they send it back home, send it to their families or whatever. And it's a hefty amount. from all over the world. Mexicans send back about $29 billion to the government, the vast majority from the United States. So roughly $25 billion a year goes from the United States to Mexico, sent there by Mexicans. And that's the second biggest component of the Mexican economy. I think oil is number one, but remittances from the United States is the second biggest source of income for their economy. So they need it, they're dependent on it, and a 4% tax, that would generate a $1 billion a year, could go right in to building the border wall. And again, that's a source of money that will be coming in perpetuity until the end of time. Now, this business about the border shutdown, the border wall, and again, going back to President Trump for a minute, and this is the kind of thing you might want to weigh in on next hour when we go to the phones, bottom of the next hour, is Donald Trump is a pretty shrewd operator, and I don't know if this is just a negotiating tactic. You start wondering about everything he says, if this is a negotiating tactic on his part to kind of lull everybody to sleep with the possibility. I mean, if Republicans say this kind of thing, well, we could do it before or we could do it after, I will flat out guarantee you every Republican that says that will do it after because it's less painful. Now, maybe Donald Trump is kind of setting them up, and he's going to bring the hammer down right when they least expect it, throw everybody a curve, and insist that they cough up. And, and $25 billion, ladies and gentlemen, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous to have a government shutdown over $25 billion. That's a lot of money to you and me, but that is chump change. I mean, I am serious. That is chump change when it comes to the federal budget. Our military budget, national defense budget, $700 billion a year. $700 billion a year. So $25 billion is 1/28th. No, way less than that. Again, I'm doing math on the fly. Yeah. Bad, Brian. Down, Brian. So I don't know what it is, but if it was a $70 billion budget, that would be 1/28th. 1/280th. It's 1 over 2,800. That's how much of our national budget.
Okay.
Our defense budget is $25 billion for a wall. So it's just chump change. I mean, it's absurd in the highest degree that you would think about shutting the government down. Give the man his $25 billion. Come on, Republicans. I mean, you're throwing money away on welfare programs and food subsidies and all kind of stuff. Give the man his money. It's only $25 billion. Now, a lot of programs, television, radio, have been talking about this shutdown business. Here is clip number 3. This is a panel on Brett Bayer's program. Mara Liasson, she's with NPR, is on the panel, and so is Molly Hemingway from The Federalist, and they talk here about this whole business.
Congress doesn't want to shut it down. I think he's trying to send a message to his base. I care so much about these immigration issues that I'm willing to do something drastic like shut down the government. But everybody I've talked to doesn't think it's going to happen.
Does it move the needle electorally? Molly?
I think this is an issue where you're just seeing huge division, particularly on the Republican Party. You have the donor base that very much wants to continue the immigration policy as it has been. You have a voter base that has gotten rather sick and tired of continuing those things and not dealing with some of the systematic problems with our immigration policy. So it's hard to say how it plays out because you have a divided group here.
We have a divided group, and Molly Hemingway talked about this yesterday. We played the sound bites. You've got the donor class and you have the voter class. Well, it's no doubt which class we belong in. We are the voter class. We're the people that actually put Donald Trump in office. And to me, this is exactly what's going on here. It's a fight between the donor class. Who do you think Mitch McConnell is going to represent? Yeah. Who do you think Paul Ryan is going to represent? They're going to defend and support and vote with the donor class. They're going to do whatever the donor class wants them to do. And the point here is that the donor class represents big business. And big business in America, they want unrestricted immigration. All of your companies, all your big companies, they want cheap labor. They don't care where it comes from. They don't care what kind of crime these people are bringing with them. They don't care what kind of drug problems they cause. They don't care what kind of violence they cause in your communities, because they don't have to live around any of that. You know, they live in these isolated compounds, gated compounds, patrolled by security. They have no worries about what illegal immigrants are going to do to them. They live above all that. They're insulated from all of that. So they're perfectly willing to have us shoulder those risks of drugs and crime and whatever, but they're not willing to shoulder the risk themselves, but they want the cheap labor. So that's what the shootout is. That's what the showdown really is over here. You know, and I think there's, you know, I think the only risk for Donald Trump, frankly, the only risk electorally or politically that Donald Trump has is not to shut down the government over wall funding. That's the only risk he's got, because he's got a base that wants him to do it. They're chomping at the bit for him to do it. They couldn't wait for a candidate that said, I'm going to get a wall on the southern border, a great big beautiful wall with a great big beautiful door so we can let people in legally. And his base was ecstatic about that, still are. So if he kind of dangles the promise and then jerks it away from his base again, that's the only way he could possibly get into any kind of trouble here. They might begin to doubt his resolve. They might begin to doubt whether he really meant that promise, even though he's delivered on a lot of other promises. This is a pretty big one to us, and I'm wondering if President Trump is going to deliver on this one. So that's the only way this could hurt him, as I see it. If he doesn't stick to his guns, it could cost him at the polls. Now, you know, a lot of movement on the part of the left to try to abolish ICE, abolish immigration. I mean, you talk about stupidity on steroids. Abolishing ICE, you know, would be it. Who's going to lock these people up? Who's going to take MS-13 off our streets? Who's going to catch the murderers that from MS-13 that are killing people right and left and make sure they get sent back to where they came from? That's going to be ICE. Anyway, here is a candidate for the Attorney General's office in New York, if you can believe this. This woman, that's a woman, right, Rob? Her name is Zephyr Teachout. Zephyr like the wind. Zephyr Teachout is her last name. She wants to be the Attorney General of the state of New York. She wants to be the chief legal officer, the chief law enforcement officer for the state of New York, which is the second most populous state in the Union. So here is, she made an ad out of this video. Here's an excerpt of Zephyr Teachout, possibly, in fact, likely the next Attorney General. Well, where's she running she's running third, so maybe we'll dodge a bullet here. She won't win. But here's what she wants to do if she is elected.
ICE was born in xenophobia in the time after 9/11 and has grown up to become a tool of fear and illegality. And as Attorney General, I will continue to speak out against ICE. I will prosecute ICE for their criminal acts. We have stories of consistent abuse within ICE. The idea that we could call this law enforcement is a real offense to the idea of law itself. And as AG and as a candidate for AG, I feel like it's really important to speak out to abolish ICE.
All right, so Zephyr Teachout wants to be the Attorney General of the state of New York. And this is a common sentiment in Democratic circles. I mean, it just sounds absolutely bizarre, and it is. But again, I've told you that the left in America is not rational. They're not rational. They're not thinking clearly. They're not thinking objectively. They are thinking entirely emotionally, thinking entirely impulsively. They're not reasoning anything through. They're not looking where the path they want to go down is going to lead. That's what we have to do. And so we're going to have to do their thinking for them on this. But she's talking about prosecuting ICE. So she is the Attorney General of a state. ICE is a federal agency. And so that'd be a question, I guess, for lawyers, but I do not see where she, as a state attorney general, would have any legal authority whatsoever to prosecute a member of ICE. So I don't know. I don't know what happens there. That she'd have to prosecute them for some state law that they violated, and she sounds like they making out like they do it all the time. What state laws they could even possibly violate that she could prosecute them for, I have no idea. But I guess that's, that's kind of the division that we're getting in our nation right now, it's not only between donors and voters, but it's between those who believe in the rule of law and those who don't. It's about that simple. You got half of this country politically does not believe in the rule of law, and the other half does. And right now we're fortunate to have a president who does believe in the rule of law. We have an attorney general, at least when it comes to immigration law, who believes in the rule of law. And that's where this separation of parents from children comes from. That's what the law requires. You don't like that, Democrats? Don't bloviate and holler and scream at Jeff Sessions. Talk to your representatives and get the law changed. It's a judicial activism rule that's got everybody cobbed up. So just call up Jeff Sessions and say, look, this was a judge has no authority to make this decision. Just ignore him so you don't have to separate parents from children. So again, they just want to take it out on Republicans. That's why they're going after Sessions and Trump. But it's the law that requires it, and that's what Trump and Sessions are enforcing. Focal Point, American Family Radio. We will be right back after the news. Don't go anywhere.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
As millennials, we have more than $1 trillion in purchasing power, so you know businesses are watching us. But millennials are losing our faith, so we know Satan is watching us. Engage magazine is for millennials by millennials, and it speaks to faith, purpose, and a closer walk with Jesus. Because above all, God is watching us. Visit engagemagazine.net and listen Saturday afternoons at 5:30 Central on AFR.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Turkey's government is doubling down as the U.S. imposes new sanctions over the jailing of an American pastor, Simon Owen reports.
Turkey's foreign ministry saying it strongly protests the U.S. Treasury's move to impose sanctions on 2 senior government ministers and saying Turkey will respond in kind without delay. President Trump is pressing for the release of Andrew Brunson, an American pastor standing trial in a Turkish court on terrorism charges. Mr. Brunson says he's innocent. Turkey calling the decision to impose sanctions a disrespectful intervention in our legal system. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
More than 100 airports around the country may be getting ready to get rid of passenger security screenings. Jackie Ibanez has that story.
According to internal documents obtained by CNN, the TSA is considering getting rid of passenger screenings at more than 150 airports nationwide. The ban would apply to small or medium-sized airports with planes that have 60 seats or less. Officials say the idea has been explored since 2011. Now, the reason? Money. The June and July documents suggest the change could save $115 million annually. But analysts warn the face of terrorism has evolved since 9/11, with lone wolves now using low-tech ways to attack soft targets.
An evangelical organization is concerned about how Islam is infiltrating the church with the cooperation of the church.
Sam Rohr is president of the American Pastors Network, which says there is indeed an Islamic strategy to collapse the church in America, and the advancement of the interfaith movement is one tool to accomplish that end. He points to programs called A Common Word and Shoulder to Shoulder as examples.
There are a lot of mainline denominations, and I can name a lot of them, and that concept is to have evangelical or Christian, quote-unquote, churches and others stand together under a banner of a common faith, a common word, they call it in Islam.
But Rohr says the problem is Muslims don't worship the same God.
It's not the same God of the Bible, and it's certainly not Jesus Christ. It is amazing how many different denominations and others have actually signed on to that and saying that we ought to be more in alignment and concerned about unity of all faiths than we are about our conviction and belief and obedience to the one true faith, Jesus Christ, who is laid out in the Bible.
Rohr says it cannot be overstated that the church must not be complicit in this concerted effort to undermine and make irrelevant the Christian faith and an unwavering belief in truth in Jesus Christ. I'm Chad Groening.
Can a federal agency and a court redefine the word sex to mean gender identity and do so without Congress? That is the question before the U.S. Supreme Court Chris Woodward has more.
Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys representing a Michigan funeral home filed a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court asking justices to review a lower court decision that allowed for sex to be redefined as gender identity. In March, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit ruled the federal government can force the funeral home operator to allow a male employee who identifies as female to dress in women's clothing in violation of the funeral home's sex-specific dress code. In doing so, ADF attorney Jim Campbell says the court redefined sex in Title VII to mean something other than what Congress clearly intended.
No court or federal agency has the power to rewrite a statute. That power belongs only to Congress. Replacing sex with gender identity, as the Sixth Circuit did in this case, is a dramatic change in the law. What it means to be male or female shifts from a biological reality to a subjective perception.
In 2016, a federal district court ruled in favor of the funeral home operator. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission appealed the decision to the Sixth Circuit. I'm Chris Woodward.
And world shares slipped today, tracking losses overnight on Wall Street, where investors sold industrial stocks following reports that the Trump administration is considering higher tax rates on Chinese imports. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Okay, so what is this you just handed me?
It's a Bible, man.
A Bible? What is a Bible?
Basic instructions before leaving Earth. It's just like God talking to you.
Before leaving Earth? Wait. What happens after I leave Earth?
American Family Radio, Engage Magazine, and Revival Fires International are partnering to give God's Word to our nation's youth. Truth for Youth Week is coming, August 6th through 10th on American Family Radio.
And Wolf, just to give you a sense as to what's happening right now, you can hear there is a chorus of boos and other chants from this Trump crowd here in Tampa, Florida.
Honestly, it felt like we weren't in America anymore.
Can you comment on Michael Flynn being indicted?
These opinions that these folks have at these rallies, they're shaped by what they see in the primetime hours of Fox News.
Caucasian or white countries, sir, or do you want people to come in from other parts of the world where they're people of color?
Americans should not be treating their fellow Americans in this way.
Mr. President, can you be America first but also be rubbing elbows with all these bigwigs? Mr. President, how can you be America first when you're rubbing elbows with all these bigwigs, sir?
It's a pitting of American against American, and honestly, it needs to stop.
Maybe we should turn the cameras on, Sean. Why don't we turn the cameras on? Why don't we turn the cameras on?
I'm sorry.
Why not turn the cameras on, Sean?
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, the network of American Family Radio. And don't forget, programming note, this time on Monday, you'll be listening to Stacy Washington, Stacy on the Right, in this hour. Had a chance to meet with her and chat with her last hour. She will be on this hour starting on Monday, October 6th. Now I want to take a cue from Jeff's little audio tease there for the program today. Let's drop down to clip number 4, if we can, Rob. This is Jim Acosta, the CNN guy. This guy is probably I would have no hesitation calling this guy the most annoying man in American media. This guy just annoying, just pesters people with questions, pesters them with questions, and he just won't stop. He won't give it a rest. So here is Jim Acosta. Remember, he was at the Trump rally, wherever that was, last week.
Florida.
Oh, Tampa, Florida, yeah. And Trump supporters were yelling at him, CNN sucks, and this is fake news, and go home, and all that. You know, and this guy's trying to make out like this energy in the Trump campaign is going to result in the deaths of journalists. Well, you look at Jim Acosta, you got to ask yourself, how afraid is this guy? He's standing there right in the middle of this crowd. He's not got any kind of barrier between him and the Trump supporters, doesn't have any kind of security around him with guns or anything else. He obviously is completely unafraid of Trump supporters. He knows he doesn't have to worry about being pummeled and attacked and murdered by Trump supporters. Didn't have a thing in the world to fear. That's why he's standing there without any kind of apprehension right in the middle of that crowd. But here is the way he reports on what happened to him.
Honestly, it felt like we weren't in America anymore. I don't know how to put it any more plainly than that. Americans should not be treating their fellow Americans in this way. These opinions that these folks have at these rallies, they're shaped by what they see in the primetime hours of Fox News and what they hear from some conservative news outlets that just sort of give them this daily diet of what they consider to be terrible things that we do over here at CNN. It's very unfortunate, but it's a pitting of American against American, and honestly, it needs to stop.
Honestly, it needs to stop. People in America simply should not treat other people that way. You know, I think the natural response to that is, well, then why are you doing it? Why are you using such unhinged rhetoric and such dark rhetoric? And by the way, we mentioned this yesterday, the harder they try to knock Donald Trump out, the better his poll numbers are. They're up to 50% today. This is 5 points higher. Listen to this now. This is the Fisher factoid of the day. If you don't remember anything else I said today, remember this. President Trump's approval rating is at 50%. That is 5 points higher than it was at the same time under Barack Obama. Barack Obama's approval rating at this same point in his presidency was 45%. More Americans liked Donald Trump than liked Barack Obama. So his numbers just keep going up, no matter how hard they shoot. There's an expression that my mentor taught me: God's men bounce. You can keep hitting them, and they just bounce right up off the canvas and get back in the ring and keep swinging. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. So he is continuing to defy the law of gravity, staking his claim to the Nobel Prize for Physics. And thinking about the American people in general, only 37% of the American people right now think that the Mueller probe is good for the country. 40% of them think it's a partisan witch hunt, and 41% of Americans think that it was Hillary Clinton that colluded with Russia and not Trump. So the Mueller thing, whatever the elites think of it, it's not catching on with the American people. You know, and you think about some of the things that people said, celebrities and media said about this Trump rally. I mean, they said that this looks like a scene from a Ku Klux Klan rally. So they're basically calling Trump supporters, they remind me of the Ku Klux Klan. What did the Ku Klux Klan do? They went around lynching black people. That's what they did. So there's where you get that idea these people represent a threat. So they remind them of the Ku Klux Klan. They liken Trump supporters not only to the KKK, but to the Nazis. They call them white trash. They link them to Hitler. Here is Christopher O'Reilly. This guy is a regular contributor on PBS and NPR. He literally called for the enforced slaughter of Trump supporters. What? Here's the tweet that he sent out. Quote, calling them deplorables is euphemizing them. May be better to euthanize them. So euphemism means we're just using a euphemism. We want to call them something else, but deplorables is a substitute word that we can use. But while we're talking about euphemizing, why don't we use a better word? Why don't we just euthanize them? Well, now, of course, he's having fun, but for some reason in his twisted worldview, he thinks that's actually funny. You know, and we had this story. I don't know if you saw this. This is in Taunton, New Jersey. There was a woman that was driving down the street, and there was a guy that was driving along with this woman behind her, didn't know anything about her, but she starts honking her horn. And she just follows him down the road, honking her horn, honking her horn. So he stops his car thinking that maybe there's something wrong with the tag end of my car, gets out of his car. She drives around his car and drives her car right at him and hits the passenger door. He'd opened the passenger door or the driver's door to get out of the car. She hits the driver's door and then drives off. And it turns out that what she was outraged by is that he had a Trump sticker on the back of his car. He had a Trump sticker on the back of his car, and she tried to kill him, tried to run him down with her car. So I think it's a good question. Who has the most to fear here? Do the Trump supporters have the most to fear here, or the Trump critics who have the most to fear? Pretty clear to me it's the Trump supporters that have the most to fear from possible violence. That woman's been arrested, and I think she's going to have to face trial for her trouble. But again, this whole idea that somehow Trump supporters are endangering the very lives of journalists, you know, and again, it goes back to what we said about Jim Acosta. This is wrong for Americans to treat each other this way. And you want to say to Jim, all right, well, you first. You know, if you think it's the wrong way, to give us an example of how Christians ought to be treating each other, because we are not seeing it at this point. Now, Maxine Waters, by the way, she's gotten herself in a little bit of trouble. She's been sending out what are called slate mailers, slate like S-L-A-T-E. And what these are mailers that go out that contain the names and the pictures of everybody that she's endorsing. And she'll have these fake ballots in there with their names already entered in. These are the people that I, Maxine Waters, endorsed. And candidates will give her beaucoup money. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break, but it's a kind of a roundabout way for her to avoid campaign contribution limits.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Why won't the Republicans repeal the Affordable Care Act, and why are they trying to strengthen it? Are they clueless, unwilling, or doing the bidding of big donors? The Republicans plan to pass a bill to make low-premium, high-deductible, catastrophic health plans available to anyone who wants them, reports the Washington Post. Not true. Instead, it would force those who buy these plans to subsidize the older and sicker individuals on the exchanges, many of them there with costly, uninsurable, pre-existing conditions. The bill would put both of these groups together in a single Obamacare risk pool, forcing the premiums of the healthy to pay for the already sick. This is not a catastrophic plan, and it won't be affordable.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, I'm reading through the Old Testament now, and I'm coming to places that are named that I see on our Israel tour every March. It's really fascinating to think that Jericho existed way back in the Old Testament, thousands of years ago, and I can visit there today. The same can be said for Jerusalem. The Bible literally comes to life when you visit Israel, the Holy Land. Now, we're going in March. My wife Allison and I, we lead these tours every March. So if you would like to go with us, you need to go to the website and check it out. It's twholyland.com, twholyland.com. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, just call us at 800-FAMILIES, option 5. That's 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and we'll send you a brochure.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you on board the USS Focal Point. Let's move forward with a little bit of content here. Talking about Maxine Waters, and she sends out these slate mailers. And slate, she's talking about a slate of candidates. So she goes to these people like Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, Dianne Feinstein. She hits up sheriffs and county judge candidates and state legislators and say, hey, if you give me enough money, I will put you in my mailer and endorse you. So it's a way that she's raising beaucoup dollars for her campaign and evading campaign contribution limits. I mean, the limit is something like $2,700 to give to an individual candidate, but Gavin Newsom gave her $27,000 to be in this mailer. Kamala Harris gave her $35,000 to be in this mailer. Dianne Feinstein gave her $27,000 to be in this mailer. And you have the peons, you know, the county sheriffs and the judges and the state legislatures. They give anywhere between $2,000 and $12,000 to Maxine Waters. So she's getting some unwelcome attention. Apparently, it's not technically illegal what she's doing, so she'll probably be able to get along with it. And, you know, if it's should be illegal and somebody needs to make it illegal, otherwise she can do it. As long as it's legally permissible, then she can do it. Now, this Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she went out to Hollywood this week, and they don't want to have anything to do with her. The stars out in Hollywood shunned her like she had the bubonic plague. I mean, these are the celebrity types, the Hollywood types that cough up big for Democrat superstars. They don't want to be anywhere around this woman. They don't even want to be in the same zip code with this woman. So no coffee session with Carl Reiner, no sit down with Jeffrey Katzenberg or David Geffen, no $5,000 a plate dinner at Robert Iger's mansion in Brentwood. So, I mean, they're smart enough to realize that this woman electorally, I mean, she is so far out there, probably not going to be an asset to anybody to be in her corner. Now, on the Mueller collusion thing for a second, let's turn our attention to a little bit of that for a few minutes. You know, that the judge has really gotten, I mean, like I mentioned this first hour, the judge has really gotten into the grill of Mueller's attorneys who were trying to convict Manafort. And he's gotten right up in their grill. He is a no-nonsense guy, 78 years old. He doesn't take anything from anybody. He's got a pretty good sense of humor, has a sharp wit, doesn't mind dressing down lawyers that he believes are wasting his time or who are making remarks that are out of scope. And anyway, he rebuked Mueller's attorneys. He says, look, they're trying to submit as evidence. I'm serious. The Mueller, they're trying to submit as evidence in this case pictures from his suit closet. They want to show the jurors the fancy pants suits that he has. Well, there's a lot of people in the world that have fancy pants suits. They went out and they worked hard, they made money, and they bought fancy pants suits. That's no evidence of anything. And that's what the judge is saying. He finally told him, look, I'm not going to let you present any of these pictures. He said this is a quote, "We don't convict people because they have a lot of money and throw it around. So put those pictures away. I'm not going to be admitted as evidence." Says he is not on trial for having a lavish lifestyle. That is not a crime in America. Now, Andrew Napolitano pointed out today that, and I think I mentioned this yesterday or the day before, that Manafort has been investigated for exactly what Mueller is prosecuting him for. He was investigated by the FBI 8 years ago for exactly the stuff that Mueller is prosecuting him for, and he was exonerated 8 years ago. And you know who the lawyer was that exonerated Paul Manafort 8 years ago? Rod Rosenstein. Wow. Rod Rosenstein is the one that said there's nothing here. There's nothing to prosecute here. Rod Rosenstein let him off the hook. So we'll see where all of this goes. It's just turning into kind of a Mueller circus is what this is turning. Isn't that ridiculous? You know, you got at some point you got a double jeopardy thing that ought to kick in here at some point. Now, I have a bone to pick with the Pope, and we've been over this before, so I won't take a lot of time with this. But Pope Francis came out today with a policy statement, and it's now been inserted into the Universal Catechism of the Roman Catholic Church. And I want to be clear here. This is not intended as a criticism of the Pope or a criticism of the Catholic Church. It's a difference of opinion. So please don't think I'm trying to take a swing at the Pope. I'm not. He's articulated a point of view that we ought to abolish the death penalty. I believe that point of view is biblically mistaken. That's all I'm saying here. I'm not talking about the Pope as the Pope. I'm talking about the Pope and his point of view. It's the point of view. It's his worldview that I'm looking at here. Let's isolate it now from all the other emotional issues that get into Catholicism and all the business. I don't want to get into that stuff. That's not what this is about. This is just about a point of view. Should we abolish the death penalty or should we not? It's now a part of the Universal Catechism in the Roman Catholic Church, so it'll be the official church policy. Now, the Roman Catholic Church used to allow for capital punishment under extreme circumstances, but now, and death penalty today is used in over 50 countries around the world. It's been banned in every European country except for Belarus and Russia, which hasn't used it in 20 years. And right now, the death penalty is banned overall in 173 countries. But the question is the death penalty biblical? Is it something that we should use? And, of course, my view is from a scriptural standpoint, it is something that ought to be on the books. For God said this in Genesis 9:5. This is all you need to know right here about the death penalty. God says this in verse 5, "For your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. I will require it from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man." So if somebody sheds the lifeblood of an innocent human being, God says, I demand a reckoning for that. I demand punishment for that. Well, what is it? This is what God says in verse 6. And remember, this is before the law of Moses. So this is before the old covenant and the ceremonial covenant and all that kind of stuff. This is prior to all of that, and it's never been revoked. So it's as in effect today as it was when God first pronounced it right after the flood. Whoever sheds the blood of man, God says, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. So some people think that said, well, we just ought to let God take care of it. And God says, well, I'm going to take care of it. And the way I'm going to take care of it is I'm going to delegate to man my moral authority to take the life of somebody who murders another human being. So God is saying, look, capital punishment for murder is my idea. And I've enshrined it here in the scriptures. I've never changed my mind about this. I've never revoked this principle. If a man sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. It's reauthorized in Romans 13 when Paul talks about the civil servant, and he says he does not bear the sword for nothing. Well, what's the sword? It's an instrument of lethal punishment. It's an instrument that you would use for capital punishment. So I believe the Pope is simply in error on that according to the Scripture. That's my point of view, and I realize that Pope Francis has his point of view, and I don't quarrel with him having the right to exercise and express that point of view in his realm of responsibility and authority. By the way, one other thought, I've done a little bit of reading on the situation in South Africa today, and a lot of warning signals being sent coming out from South Africa that if they go through with this, right now the parliament there is trying to amend their constitution. I mean, they're going to make it a constitutional right, not just a legal right, but a constitutional right to take the land of somebody simply based on the color of their skin. In other words, they're going to try to put this in their constitution that if your skin is the wrong color, your farm can be taken from you, can be stolen from you with no compensation. And so you're on the verge of this. Happened in Zimbabwe. They had a time of famine and starvation in Zimbabwe when they did the same thing to white farmers in Zimbabwe. Now they're getting ready to do it in South Africa. So where we are headed for, ladies and gentlemen, in South Africa is a time of chaos. We're headed for anarchy. We're headed for starvation because the farmers in Zimbabwe had made Zimbabwe and South Africa into the breadbasket of the African continent. They literally were providing grains and food and so forth for the entire continent of Africa. When their farms were stolen from them, they did not know how to farm the land. They had not developed any kind of agricultural skills. They could not get the same productivity out of the land that the farmers who were there before him. And so pretty soon you had famine, starvation all over the country of Zimbabwe. So, and Jeff was telling me about a documentary he'd seen by Laura Southern on what was going on in South Africa. And I don't know what else you remember, Jeff, from that documentary, but she was pointing out that whites apparently, again, because of the color of their skin, they're not eligible, for example, for any welfare benefits at all.
Correct.
So again, wrong color of skin.
Ever since 2001, I think that policy's been in place. Also, they're many times refused any kind of medical care based on the color of their skin.
All right.
I got this. I started watching this out of a recommendation of one of your Facebook Live people, and it was very interesting. I'd like to learn a lot more. That South Africa is a very complex situation right there.
Yeah.
But far worse than people know.
Well, and it's about to get just almost unspeakably bad, especially for people who have the wrong skin color. We had a whole host of murders in Zimbabwe when that went into effect, and the same thing in South Africa. Be right back. Stay with us.
Where's your citizenship? It may be a question you've never considered. This is Jim Garlow. When you accept Christ, you have dual citizenship. One in an eternal kingdom you have yet to see. Think about it. You have more in common with someone who is a serious believer of Jesus in Iraq or Colombia or New Zealand than you do with an unbeliever who lives across the street. Far more. Countries like ours will pass away, but the kingdom of God will last forever. You're living for another kingdom. That means you don't just see Jesus as the one who saves you from sin, though that's pretty awesome. You see Jesus as Lord over your life, your world. If I could give our nation a gift, it would be a healthy reverence of God. A reverence that's pretty much gone from the culture. A reverence that says, you're God, I'm not. There's more at jimgarlow.com.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. The human body needs 8 hours of sleep, sometimes more. But who actually gets that much on a regular basis? Maybe you're working 2 jobs. Maybe you have a newborn baby at home. Maybe you're so worried about the future that you can't even sleep when you try. When I'm overwhelmed, the picture of God in Psalm 121 is a great comfort. It says, "He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep." So you can go and do whatever God has called you to do today, but when it's time to rest, lay down your unfinished tasks down before Him and trust that He's at work even while you sleep. Try out Anchor Devotional in print. Visit getanchor.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Network American Family Radio. Good to have you in the conversation today. LeBron James just signed a boku $1 million contract with the LA Lakers. I don't know how much that contract was worth. Does anybody know?
I can look it up.
Okay, but I mean,
it should be.
Whew. LA Lakers. I mean, you talk about some glitz and all that stuff. So LeBron going to be an LA Laker, and he was interviewed by Don Lemon last night.
It's a 4-year contract for $153.3 million. So
$153 million. So
for 4 years,
almost $40 million a year. I think Steph Curry for the Warriors, I think he's got a contract that over the course of the contract is worth like $400 million. So anyway, LeBron is talking with Don Lemon here, and LeBron's point is, or he's blaming Donald Trump for dividing the nation. By the way, all this unrest and all this stuff, it's all being blamed on Fox by the talking snake media. But anyway, LeBron is accusing Donald Trump of being the one that is dividing us, and what we need is people who will bring someone together. You know, sports is something that normally brings people together. We need somebody who knows how to use sports to bring people together. So listen to LeBron talking about this and pay careful attention to what he says at the end.
We are in a position right now in America, more importantly, where this race thing is taking over, you know, and because I believe our president is kind of trying to divide us. But I think
kind of.
Yeah, is. Not, I don't want to say kind of. He's dividing us, and what I noticed over the last few months, that he's kind of used sport to kind of divide us, and that's something that I can't relate to, because I know that sport was the first time I ever was around someone white, you know, and I got an opportunity to see them and learn about them, and they got an opportunity to learn about me, and we became very good friends, and I was like, oh, wow, this is all because of sports. And sports has never been something that divides people. It's always been something that brings someone together.
What would you say to the president if he's sitting right here?
I would never sit across from him.
You would never? You didn't want to talk to him?
Nah. I sit across from Barack, though.
Okay. Well, let's see. What race is the president? Well, let's see. He would be white. LeBron is black. Sports, LeBron says, is something that has always brought us together. Would I sit across the table from the president? Not on your life. I would sit across the table from Barack. So who's using sports to divide us now? Huh, LeBron? Now let's
It does seem a little odd, too, when you think about it. The NFL players are kneeling, and the president's basically saying that's disrespectful. And then you have LeBron now saying he's dividing the country.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
projecting the whole problem.
Who is dividing the country?
Who's being disrespectful and divisive?
That's
here.
right.
You know, it's kind of like, you know, this is kind of the president's point. You know, the national anthem and the American flag has always been something that has united us. Like LeBron is saying sports does. You know, the July 4th parades, and flags and fireworks, always been something that has united us. And now it's dividing us, but Donald Trump didn't have a single solitary thing to do with that. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and do a little bit more on the Mueller investigation. Here's clip 5. This is Joe Scarborough. And again, what I want you to do is to notice the key word. I want to see again that they've shifted their vocabulary, the left has now, and they've got a whole new word now that they're working on. Let's listen.
Not colluding. Let's just not use the word colluding. They were conspiring with the Russians. This is a conspiracy. So no collusion, okay, no collusion. A conspiracy, a criminal conspiracy possibly. But he distracts the people in the crowd, calls it fake news, and hopes he can get away with crimes.
All right, so Joe Scarborough accusing the president of crimes, but he doesn't mention any crimes. In fact, he says this conspiracy could possibly be a criminal conspiracy, which means, of course, it possibly might not. Because Joe Scarborough says, can't think of a single crime he was conspiring to commit. But anyway, conspiracy is going to be their new word. You know, and again, a conspiracy is only a conspiracy if it's a conspiracy to commit a crime. You know, if I conspire together with my children to surprise Debbie, we surprised her with a 40th birthday party. I conspired with a whole bunch of people to throw a 40th birthday party for Debbie. You know, and when I brought her to the place where the party was. She opened the door, and everybody started hollering out, happy birthday and all that kind of stuff. Debbie, I actually have it on tape. She hauled off and slugged me right in the solar plexus because she had told me I do not want a surprise birthday party on my 40th birthday. So she was not a happy camper. But, you know, so I asked, the first question I had, how many people lied to help pull off this surprise birthday party for Debbie? Virtually every hand in the room, I had 40 people there, every hand in the room went up. We'd all conspired together to do what? To throw a surprise birthday party for my bride. So it's a conspiracy, all right, but it was not a criminal conspiracy, unless maybe it was in Debbie's eyes. That is entirely possible. So anyway, that's the new word, though. Get ready to hear the word conspiracy a lot. Now here is Dick Durbin, clip number 6, and let's listen to what he has to say.
When he starts trying to influence a man that he appointed as Attorney General, it gets dangerously close to obstruction of justice.
Can a president obstruct justice? And if so, what would you need to see?
Well, of course he can obstruct justice, and in this situation, an investigation which may or may not find him culpable, if he tries to stop it, if he tries to dismiss Bob Mueller before he's completed the investigation, all of these things, I think, are, as they say, prima facie evidence.
All right, so Dick Durbin, he's talking about the president sending these tweets out telling Jeff Sessions, look, you got to do something about Mueller. You got to bring this investigation to an end, and this is all under Jeff Sessions' purview. You know, the only stuff that Sessions recused himself from is stuff that had to do with the campaign. A lot of people forget that. The only thing he recused himself from, if it had to do with the Trump campaign, I'm going to recuse myself. This Manafort investigation, this show trial, this circus, doesn't have anything to do with Trump-Russia collusion, doesn't have anything to do with the campaign. Jeff Sessions could insert himself back in that environment immediately. He could do it this afternoon. And Jeff Sessions works for whom? He works for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has the authority to direct him in carrying out his duties. If he directs him to shut this thing down, then Jeff Sessions should shut the thing down. President Trump has the authority. That would not be obstruction of justice if he's exercising constitutional authority. All right, let's drop back to clip number 7. This is Chuck Grassley, who's the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and this is where all of the nominations go. So Brett Kavanaugh's nomination is going to wind up going through the Judiciary Committee, and we've been anxious to see this nomination process accelerated, hurried along. We would like to have Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court bench by the first Monday in October, so he can be a full-fledged part of the Supreme Court from day one when their session begins on the first Monday in October. And Grassley apparently is thinking about a timetable of its own. And by the way, what the Democrats are doing, and it's not working, the Democrats are trying to slow this whole thing down by demanding more and more documents. They want more documents to look at. They want all of the documents that passed through Brett Kavanaugh's hands when he was the staff secretary to President George W. Bush. Well, who knows how many documents, because every document that the president saw went through his hands. And the vast majority of them didn't have anything explosive in them, anything inflammatory, even anything insightful in them. So it's a complete fishing expedition, complete waste of time, would say nothing about his judicial philosophy, because these weren't papers that Brett Kavanaugh prepared for the president. Well, they might be in some cases, but these were papers that other people in his area, in the White House and in the executive office building, had prepared for President Bush, and they go to Brett Kavanaugh first to make sure this is someone that needs to go to the president. Does somebody else handle this, whatever. So there's nothing there to see. And you know, Elena Kagan, when she was nominated for the Supreme Court, she had no judicial experience whatsoever. You know, one of the knocks on Amy Coney Barrett didn't have much judicial experience. Elena Kagan had zero, even less than Amy Coney Barrett, had none, explicitly and expressly none. And Barack Obama didn't send any documents. Elena Kagan worked in his administration. She was the Solicitor General. She was the president's lawyer, representing legal issues that the White House dealt with, and Obama didn't provide one single solitary document on Kagan for them to examine. So this is just crazy talk. It's not working. The Republican senators aren't buying it. They want to get this show on the road. But here's what Chuck Grassley says in clip 7 talking to Hugh Hewitt.
Well, all I can tell you at this point, and maybe a week from now I can be more specific, sometime during September. But the earlier the better. And if these documents coming from the archives and from George W. Bush's presidential library and other things get up here soon, then the sooner the better we can have a hearing. But we normally take, let me give you some sort of a ballpark rationale for what I just said. July the 9th, the nominee is appointed by the president. Then usually 65 to 70 days on average. Kagan took about 80-some days. So about two-thirds of that time would be used for staff and senators going over everything that we have on a particular candidate. And then you have a week of hearing.
There's no way to start the hearings in August because some people had hoped that we would have that special session. Part of it would be given over to the Kavanaugh hearings.
Yeah, I kind of doubt it. I wouldn't say no at this point because this is only August 1st, but it seems to me like early September would be the earliest.
And he's been talking about actually shoving this thing off until October. You know, using his own metrics, Kavanaugh was nominated on July 9. If you go 65, 70 days out, which is the normal time period, that would take you to September 15 to the 20th, somewhere in that range. Kavanaugh would be confirmed by the end of September. Get with it, Chuck Grassley. Number to call if you want to join the conversation. Tell us why, if you think Trump ought to shut down the government, 888-589-8840.
On the next Today's Issues.
Walker Wildman is handling our Facebook presence in the world.
Yeah, if you have a Facebook account, just type in Today's Issues in your search bar, and then our page will pop up. And you can watch the show there every day, or you can view all the articles that we talk about.
Right, but you can also be our friend.
Don't miss the next Today's Issues. Weekday mornings at 11 Eastern, 10 Central on American Family Radio, and on Facebook.
Who is God?
What's he like?
How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Homeschool, skeptic, and group discounts are available. Pre-registration ends October 9th at ses.edu.
What if I told you that you could clean your family's laundry and help reach the next generation at the same time? That opportunity is here through a company called Redeem Clean. Every time you use Redeem Clean products, you help support the ministry of the American Family Association. In addition to your regular AFA giving, Redeem Clean laundry detergent allows you to increase your support of AFA just by continuing to wash your family's clothes. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made in the USA. And they were developed exclusively for the support of the American Family Association. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more, find options, and order Redeem Clean products at afastore.net. That's afastore.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point. Taking calls in this segment. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. I want to ask one question and have you respond to one question. I'm usually a little looser about kind of topics to address in phone calls, but on the phone calls, I want you to address the question of whether you think Donald Trump should shut down the government or not in order to get funding for the wall. Do you think he should or should not shut down the government before the election to get funding for the wall, and then I want you to give me a reason or two about why you want to do that. So that's where we're going to be going with the phone calls. Do you think President Trump should or should not shut down the government to get his funding for the wall? By the way, people are saying now they've solved the Bermuda Triangle. They're saying that likely, 1,000 people have died in the Bermuda Triangle over the course of time, and they're thinking now it is because of rogue waves. These are waves that could be high as 100 feet, and you have three seas that kind of come together in that area, and they can come together at the same time. Three storms could come together and form a huge wave and topple ships. So there may be a whole bunch of ships down on the bottom of the ocean out there. So Bermuda Triangle, that's the latest solution, rogue waves. You know, the guy on the bicycle that shot President Bush's doctor, they got a suspect in custody now. Turns out he's been carrying a grudge against this doctor for 20 years. His mom died in surgery, and this guy was the surgeon when his mom died, waited 20 years to try to get even. Experts are indicating that one single lithium battery, like you have in a cell phone or in a computer, one single lithium battery that explodes in a cargo area could endanger the whole plane because the fire suppression systems can't stop it. You know, it could be confined to the luggage, but you have other stuff in the luggage that's flammable. I mean, stuff that you carry for cosmetic purposes and stuff like that. And if that little small lithium battery lights off that, I mean, you could have a whole lot of trouble. You know, and it's my theory has been that Malaysian Flight 370 that disappeared into the ocean. Remember, it climbed rapidly up to 23,000 feet, and then it took a descent and then flew at a low level across the ocean before it ran out of fuel and crashed. Well, we found out later that they had a huge, 220 tons of, I think it was 220 tons or 20 tons or whatever, just a lot. Big payload of lithium-ion batteries that they were transporting down in the cargo hold. And it's now they've got a new rule that you can't transport lithium-ion batteries in a plane, in a passenger plane. Can't do it. It's now against the law. So it's their way of admitting, yeah, we agree with that talk show host over there in Mississippi that that's what caused the fire in that plane. All right, let's go to the phones, find out if you want Donald Trump to shut down the government, if that's what it takes to get funding for the wall. Let's go to Rick in Michigan. Rick, tell me, what do you think?
Hey, Brian, love your show.
Thank you.
Hey, I think that, I'm so tired of hearing Republicans say, don't do it because our midterms are coming up. You know, if you've listened to what President Trump says and to what these other Republicans say, the midterm elections aren't going to matter because you're going to vote for the Republicans in the midterm if that's what you believe in. I think they're just using it as an excuse for him not to be able to do what he said he was going to do when he was elected.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, Rick. You know, we had that one soundbite. They want to sound like, Bob Thune says, yeah, I support the president on the wall. I support it. I think it's a great idea, but I do not think now is the time. Never said when the time is. And I'm with you, Rick. I think Senator Thune was just giving us kind of just smoke to try to justify kicking the can down the road. All right, Rick, thank you. Good call. Let's go to Bill in Billington, West Virginia. Bill, what do you say, yes or no?
Hi, Brian. I say yes, shut it down. And the reason I say shut it down is these guys, if they're afraid that if they shut the government down, people are going to find out exactly what they do. Nothing. And they're always on vacation. They're always, I wish I could have a job getting paid what they get paid and go on vacation every 3 or 4 weeks for 5 weeks.
Well, and they work 3 days a week. I was reading that article. I was reading that article about Chuck Grassley and the timing on Kavanaugh. Well, yeah, we got to spend a week for the examination of Brett Kavanaugh. So you bet that week we're going to be in town Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to spend a full week making sure we do our due diligence with the Supreme Court nominee. So you're exactly right, Bill. And a good question is, what they ought to do is shut down the government and not tell anybody and see if anybody notices. Find out how long it takes before people find out that they aren't showing up to work because they aren't getting anything done when they're there. All right, Bill, that's a great call. Let us go to Paul in Dallas, Texas. Paul, welcome. Shut it down or not?
Yeah, shut it down, and for a simple reason. He's really tired of the Republican leadership lying to him, and he has a very simple case to make. When he shuts it down and they say, you're being so cruel and you're making people suffer, he's going to go back to that omnibus bill they shoved down his throat, and he's going to line item the $1 billion for here, Senator so-and-so, Senator other so-and-so, here's your $7 billion, and he's going to total these amounts up and say, you don't have $25 billion for a wall, but you have this many billion for this and this, and he's going to use names, he's going to point fingers, and he's going to like pull the cockroaches out of their hiding places.
Well, you know, that's actually brilliant, Paul. That's a brilliant suggestion, because you got to believe, I mean, I don't know what the overall total size of the federal budget is. I think it's around $3.5 trillion, something like that, is the overall total of the federal budget when everything is added up. And to think that you can have a budget of $3.5 trillion and you can't find $25 billion in there somewhere to build, well, it's just absurd. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I think, Paul, that's a great suggestion. And, you know, it's too bad that we don't have the president on the line right here. I mean, he's going to call Rush Limbaugh. Why didn't he call me? You know, I've been doing this 9 years. So what Rush has been doing it 30 years? I mean, 9, that ain't chump change. Anyway, I don't expect to hear from the president anytime soon, Paul, but if I do, I'm going to pass on your suggestion. I think it's a great one. Thanks, Paul. Good call. Let's go to David in Shreveport, Louisiana. David, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
I'm for them shutting down the government. He needs to show strength to the establishment and the Democrats, because it's just like dealing with those other countries that only respect strength. And if he calls their bluff, they'll fold. They will fold. I mean, that's all there is to it. And just a little encouragement for all the Christians out there is that, you know, especially with all this political time, is that one day we will have a perfect government, because the King of Kings and Lord of Lords will be ruling it and reigning. And so all this political stuff we have to put up now in this age, we have that encouragement that one day we will have a perfect government with no corruption.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thank you for that. And by the way, you know, just an addendum to what David is saying, he's absolutely right. This world, this earth is one day going to be run right. And here's the other deal. You and I are going to be a part of that. We're going to be part. Christ is going to pick some from among us to be judges. I mean, he tells us that in 1 Corinthians 6. One day we are going to judge angels. One day we are going to judge the world. You know, Jesus talked a lot about that, the 12 thrones and who's going to sit on them, judging the nations. That's going to be us in the age to come. Now, if you don't want to be a judge, Christ isn't going to make you one. But this is sort of a kind of an apprentice period, as I see it, because this is an opportunity for us, our time on this earth, an opportunity for us to demonstrate how we want to serve the kingdom of God and how we can serve the kingdom of God. And Christ is going. This is like a 60, 70, 80-year job audition for us. We're auditioning for the role that Christ is going to want us to play in the age to come. So that's going to be fun. And the world is going to be run right. Justice is going to be done. And the beauty of it is we get to be a part of making that happen. All right, David, appreciate the call. Thank you. Let's go to Donna, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Donna, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, I think that they should shut down the Washington government and maybe let the people government temporarily step in and go to the polls and vote on that wall.
So let the people vote on whether they want the wall or not?
Yeah, let them go to the polls and vote on it.
Yeah.
And that's hoping that there's no collusion by the left wing and the people at the Mexican border, you know.
You know, Donna, that's a really intriguing idea, because I will flat out guarantee you that if the only question on the ballot was, do you as an American, do you cast your vote for the government to appropriate $25 billion to build a wall on the southern border, I mean, that would be a slam dunk. So anyway, great idea, Donna. We'll have to forward that along to the powers that be. All right, David in Warner Robins, Georgia. David, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
I work for the federal government, and I'm all for Donald Trump shutting it down. It's not going to affect anybody. I guarantee it. Shut it down.
Now, David, have you
Paul?
Yeah. Now, how long have you worked for the federal government?
19 years.
So you've been through a shutdown or two.
Yes, sir.
How did it impact you? What was the effect on you?
I think I missed maybe 2 days of work, but I got my money reimbursed to me, so it wasn't like missing anything, really.
All right, Dave. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Like I told you, the federal workers that are sent home, they do get reimbursed. I heard a little bit of information that maybe not everybody in the military gets to keep going. I know that you got to have the basic military in place. Maybe some of them are furloughed. But here's a government worker. He wants it shut down because he's as agitated as we are with the government waste and the obstructionism in D.C. trying to block the president and his agenda. All right, well, that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. We'll be back here tomorrow. Do not forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you, and never forget we are fighting a winnable war. See you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association. We're here to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture. Whether it's praying, signing a petition, or emailing leaders, your involvement is needed every